We begin in the Middle East. Israeli defense forces have carried out airstrikes on the Gaza Strip after they intercepted 5 rockets they said had been fired from there into southern Israel. It comes shortly after the IDF announced they were withdrawing from the town of Jenin in the occupied West Bank. A 2-day military operation has left 12 Palestinians and an Israeli soldier dead. Israel says the action was an attempt to root out terrorists inside the refugee camp. Palestinian leaders accused Israel of mounting an invasion. An estimated 3,000 people left the Jenin refugee camp since the attack started. Jenin has become a stronghold of a new generation of Palestinian militants who are frustrated by the West Bank-based Palestinian Authority's aging leadership and the restrictions of Israeli occupation. The United Nations has denounced the violence in Tel Aviv and Jenin. The United States said its ally, Israel, had a right to defend its people against terrorist groups, but called for the protection of civilians. Our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, is reporting from Jenin. While he was speaking last night, gunfire broke out. Here's that dramatic moment.
Longer term impact on families, on children, is that they grow up seeing all of this. And not only do they... That is, I think... The crowds are scattering down there. That fire is coming, I think, from Palestinians, firing out, perhaps, at the Israelis. This kind of thing has been going on all day.
Well, let's go live now to Yulan Nell, who's in Jenin for us. Yulan, can you tell us what activity we've been seeing over the past 12 hours or so?
Well, inside Jenin's built-up refugee camp, people started late last night heading back to inspect the damage using the light from their mobile phones because actually power had been cut off to much of the camp. You could see very quickly that roads had been ripped up. There had been cars crushed by the Israeli armoured bulldozers that went in during this military operation, the biggest in the West Bank in years. Many people were complaining that their shops had been set ablaze, all of their stock destroyed during this operation, and the fierce fighting with the armed gunmen inside the camp that resulted from that. And it's clear that some homes will simply be uninhabitable. I was in touch with the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, that provides services inside this camp. And it was telling me that they are trying to get operations there going again as quickly as possible, trying to get humanitarian aid to those who really need it. That will be the priority in the hours ahead as people tentatively return home. In terms of other activity that we have seen, there was this exchange of fire between Palestinian militants in the Gaza Strip and the Israeli forces overnight. There were 5 rockets fired from Gaza, all of them intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system, so no one was hurt. There's been no claim of responsibility from Islamic Jihad or from Hamas, which have members in the Jenin brigades, but of course are most present in Gaza. The Jenin brigades was said to be the real target of this Israeli military operation. It consists of different Palestinian factions operating inside the refugee camp. But yes, that was really more evidence, I suppose, of how this violence in Jenin had the potential to spill over. And we saw that also a day ago when there was an attack, a car ramming and stabbing attack in Tel Aviv, which injured 6 people there. The Palestinian attacker, who apparently came from the West Bank, was shot dead at the scene.
Yolande, we're already hearing from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that this was not a one-time operation. What's been the international response to what's been going on in the past 2 days?
I mean, certainly we heard the Americans talking in support of the Israeli security, as they often do, but there was growing alarm as this operation continued, which involved airstrikes as well as hundreds of Israeli soldiers on the ground. About particularly the humanitarian situation, because this refugee camp is home, the UN says, to nearly 24,000 people. It's a very densely populated place. And of course, civilians were caught up in the crossfire as all this went on. Thousands of people, we saw those desperate scenes as they tried to flee, the Israeli army allowing some out one day into the operation. And that really shows us, I think, where we're at in terms of this conflict. If you look at the big picture, yes, Israel hopes that this is going to serve as some kind of deterrent. Palestinians say that it's not the case. It has just caused more anger. And we're already in a phase of the conflict where we're seeing almost daily violence between Israelis and Palestinians, whether it's the Israeli military raids that take place in the West Bank, whether it's Palestinian attacks against Israelis. There are lots of weapons, guns in circulation nowadays. And you have had, of course, a rise in attacks by Jewish settlers in the West Bank on Palestinians. And if you look at the bigger political picture, you were saying, yes, there is really not much faith in the Palestinian leadership in the West Bank. And we've also got Israel's most right-wing government in its history. So no real horizon for peace.
Yolan, thank you for taking us through that. Yolan Yanel speaking to us from Jerusalem.